I stayed in Oxford and I did a 2-year MPhil degree in Indian religion. So essentially studying Sanskrit, Hinduism, Buddhism, a bit of Jainism. And in the summer vacation, in the middle of the 2 years of that MPhil, I went to Pune, to the Bhandarkar Institute, and I did one of my set texts was Shankaracharya's Bhashya on the Bhagavad Gita, book 2. And so I studied that with a Pandit in the Bhandarkar Institute, Mr. Rahurka. And so having studied Sanskrit using the kind of Western philological method, grammatical method, for a year or almost 9 months in Oxford, I then was subjected to the Indian method, the Guru-Shishya method, and that was very interesting. I don't think, I don't think there was really a meeting of minds in the sense that if there was when there was a puzzling passage in the Sanskrit Bhashya by Shankaracharya, I would sometimes say to Panditji, what does this mean? And he would just repeat what he just said. So I wouldn't get any further explanation. But anyway, it was extremely good for my Sanskrit to be every day studying hard, preparing it, and then going to a meeting to him. And after I finished that, I then set off to explore India a bit, which I hadn't known before. And I traveled around South India. First I went to Tirupati, where I had a special darshan of Venkateswara, and I had to sign a special bureaucratic form affirming that I honoured the god. And then I went to Chennai and Mahabalipuram and Madurai. I visited the British anthropologist Chris Fuller, who was doing his research on the Meenakshi temple of Madurai. At that time I stayed with him for a couple of days. We visited a Brahmin Agrahara in the countryside together. And then I crossed Kerala, travelled up through Kerala. Eventually I reached Mysuru, and I spent a few days in Mysuru, and I visited Somnathpur, Vellore, Halapij, and then unfortunately my time ran out, and I had to return to Oxford to continue my degree. So, to cut a long story short, having done that, I then finished the MPhil, and I then did a DPhil or PhD on the Nepalese Buddhism and the social organization of the Kathmandu Valley. And the important thing about the Kathmandu Valley, I know it's very long. I mean, you probably has anybody here actually been to Nepal? No, not a single person. One person. Okay. So for Indians, especially if you live in South India, Nepal is a long way away. It's like, I mean, it is it's not surprising. But many Nepalis come here, by the way, and I'm sure you know them because they're your chowkidars and they cook the food in your restaurants and so on. And quite a lot of them actually come, middle-class Nepalis come and study here. And some also come when they need to go to a good hospital because they think the hospitals in India are better than the hospitals in Nepal. And mostly that is true. So for many Indians it's a faraway place. Even, surprising, or more to my surprise, many Indians who live in Gorakhpur, which is half an hour's bus ride away from the Nepalese border, many of them have not been to Nepal. They know about it, but they have not. Many Nepalis come to them, but they have not been to Nepal. So for some, it's a faraway country of which they know nothing. So let me say two things. Well, one is, Nepal, from a cultural point of view, from a linguistic point of view, Nepal could easily be part of India. So the Nepali language, the national language, is an Indo-European language. It is very close to Hindi. If you speak Hindi, you can understand Nepali. About 70% of the vocabulary is the same. The grammar is not exactly the same, but it's not. It's also close to Bhojpuri, close to Bengali. So that's the first thing. It's in one sense, it is a purely historical accident that Nepal ended up being a separate nation state and not part of India. The second thing to say is the border. The border between India and Nepal is different from the border between India and any other country. It's different from the border with Bangladesh, it is different from the border with Pakistan, it is different from the border with China. It is completely open. Open for people, not for people like me, but for people like you. You can go to Nepal, you do not need a passport to go to Nepal, you can just walk in to Nepal. No, it's not open for goods, which of course means that there is a lot of smuggling, but it is open for Indian citizens, can go to Nepal with no problem. Not even nowadays. I think you are meant to carry some kind of identity, but there is basically free movement of people across that border. So it's very different from the border with Pakistan. The third thing to say is that specifically the Kathmandu Valley, where the capital of Nepal is a kind of time machine for studying ancient India. Okay? Because Nepal was never conquered by the Muslims, and it was never conquered by the British. Although it was a kind of, Marxists call it semi-colonial. I mean, it was controlled by the British to an extent, but it was not part of the British Raj. Therefore, the Kathmandu Valley preserves the state of Indian culture as it was in the Middle Ages. So that is why Buddhism survives. Buddhism which died out in South India, Buddhism which died out in Nalanda and Bihar. Of course, as I'm sure you know, the state of Bihar actually, Bihar means monastery. Why is Bihar called Bihar? Because there were so many great Buddhist monasteries that were like medieval universities in Bihar at that time. Buddhism completely disappeared in these places. All you have are archaeological remains. Whereas medieval Mahayana and Vajrayana Buddhism is still a living tradition in the Kathmandu Valley. And the native people, the indigenous people of the Kathmandu Valley, the Newars, are about 20 to 30% Buddhist. And those traditions that use Sanskrit as their liturgy are still alive there. So you've got a direct historical connection back to the kind of culture that existed in the whole of what is now India 1,000 years ago, that survives only in Kathmandu and in a very, very attenuated sense in the island of Bali in Indonesia. But essentially it survives only in Kathmandu, and then of course the exported versions ended up in Tibet, China and Japan, but obviously translated, so in a very different cultural context. So all of that means that when Nepalis come to India, they feel very at home. It's culture. Although every part of India, as you well know, every part of India is very different from every other part. The language is different. Some of the food culture is different. Festivals, and yet, at a deeper level, there are incredible continuities and similarities. So that was Louis Dumont's great insight, was to say that his original fieldwork had been done in Tamil Nadu, but then later on he did fieldwork which he hardly published on in eastern UP, in fact, not far from Gorakhpur. And his great insight was to say that India is one, in spite of the fact that you have a radically different kinship system in the south, which actually, this may be, for you, this is a kind of, you are from Karnataka, so it's completely normal for you. Cross-cousin marriage, for a man to marry his mother's brother's daughter is completely normal here. For most castes, it's the normal and expected, or at least in the past, was the expected marriage partner. And of course, as you know, but as North Indians seem not to know, that is completely taboo in North India. That is considered completely impossible. So that's a radical cultural difference in marriage patterns. And yet, underneath, and then of course the language, Dravidian languages, completely different grammar, completely different history from the languages of North India. And yet, at a deeper level, at a deeper structural level, the basic principles on which society is built, or used to be built anyway, are the same. And in fact, processes of modernization have meant also kind of the way that caste has modernized, the way that class and caste work together or against each other, that too is, there are fundamental similarities at a deeper structural level, in spite of the surface dissimilarities between different parts of India and Nepal. So let me say a little bit about, a little bit more about the specificities of Nepal. So just as in other parts of the subcontinent, you have on the one hand, you have the classic Varna system, Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, and then brackets, Panchama, or people beyond caste. And And on the other hand, you have the actual practice. And as everywhere in the subcontinent, the fourfold Varna scheme does not map one-to-one or easily onto the actual realities of jati on the ground. And that is true in Nepal, it's true in Uttar Pradesh, it's true in the south, it's true everywhere. So why do we have these two different, why do we have both Varna and jati? So my answer to that question is, Varna is the scriptural model. Varna is what you find in the old Dharma Shastras. Varna is how the old pre-modern theoreticians, the pre-modern lawgivers talked about caste. They talked about it using the four Varna scheme. And they tried to apply that four Varna scheme to the actual realities of caste competition on the ground. And this is where my take-home message comes, if you like. As a social anthropologist or sociologist, if you want to call it, as a fieldworking sociologist, my plea to you, and by the way, I forgot to say at the beginning, congratulations everybody. Congratulations on getting into the government service. I know that that wasn't easy. You probably all worked incredibly hard for many years to get here. So many congratulations on that. And also many congratulations on taking up posts which really have the potential to make the difference at the ground level. So my message to you as a sociologist, I mean, you have the technical skills, okay, which I don't have. You have technical expertise, which means you are experts in a particular form of knowledge which other people don't have. That gives you the authority to tell people what to do. Okay? So my plea to you is keep that authority. By all means, use your knowledge wisely, but at the same time use it humbly. Try to be an amateur sociologist wherever you're posted, in whichever part of Karnataka you find yourself. Try to learn the local dialect, and not in the literal sense, learn the local dialect, but also in the metaphorical sense. Find out what matters to the people that you're working among. Listen, really cultivate the skill of listening. So the qualitative sociologist or social anthropologist, they spend a lot of time in the field, and that was M.N. Srinivas's great gift to Indian sociology. He insisted that his students had to spend a whole year in the field, living with villagers, learning how they think, learning what matters to them. To an extent, unlearning their own middle-class urban background. Try and put your urban middle-class prejudices to one side. Really listen to the villagers. What are they really telling you? Okay? If you're a medical doctor and somebody comes to you, really listen carefully to exactly how they phrase what they're telling you, because it may not be easily translatable into biomedical categories. Biomedical categories may not be the best way to analyze what's wrong with them. Try to avoid just saying, oh, it's all superstition. Okay? Superstition is a much overused word in the South Asian context. Superstition is a word that middle-class people use to dismiss the views of people who are less educated than them. Try to put that word superstition to one side and really listen to them. Try and dig out what it is that they're saying and what it is that's troubling them, because it may actually not be a biomedical problem at all. They might be coming to you with something something to do with family quarrels. They might be somatizing something else. There might be all kinds of things going wrong. They might be very anxious about their children. It might not actually be a biomedical problem at all. So that's my plea to you, is to think about the terms in which people themselves express things, because that will, if you learn to listen, you will learn to be a better technician. You will learn to be a better civil servant. You will be a better servant of the people, if you like, which is, of course, the official ideology of the bureaucracy into which you've entered. So back to Nepal and the experiences of Nepal. So as I say, they have the same four Varna system, and it's highly simplified in a sense, and India has been through this process now for a century or more, whereby politics, caste and class all start to interact with each other and create what I call macro categories. So these big categories like OBC, forward caste, Dalit, these are not castes, these groupings. These are what I call macro categories. They're huge bundles of castes, so that the whole population can be classified into one of 4 or 5 baskets, which